let's get started off with number 15 with Crimson Desert. Now, this is a game that's just as much about mundane detail as it is about over-the-top battles and...
All right, this is interesting. This has been popping up in my feeds a lot. Crimson Desert. It looks really, really good. It looks very polished, very well polished, and it's the most well polished game that I've seen in a long time. Especially of this nature. It seems that people who have been complaining about some issues, maybe too many systems or shallow systems, I'm not so sure. I'm giving it some time. I want to see what happens with the game in a few months, but it's definitely on my radar. I'm keeping it as one of those. I think it's going to be one of those games we remember for decades. Okay, let's see some more.
Crazy powers and weird
Player
stuff.
Grace.
This is a complicated game. It's not for everyone, but it is a game of contrasts. Part of it is extremely video gamey and not very immersive at all, while other parts, like the main towns especially, and nature, are just filled with all these cool lived-in details that help sell this world as a living, breathing place rather than just being a bandit slaughtering simulator. Look, credit where credit is due. Pretty much every building can be entered and explored, and everywhere you go is like stacked with little details that sell what life is like for the people that live here. People aren't just standing around. If there's a farm, like, you're gonna see people out there tending to crops or carrying around baskets of goods that they're taking to the market, harvesting. Like, there are animals all over the place that will eat the food that people drop. And then you can steal, you can get on the wrong side of the law, you can play underground card games and catch cheaters in the act. There's a lot of stuff you can do in Crimson Desert.
Whoops.
And the vast majority of it is actually kind of mundane. You know, for all the over-the-top crazy stuff they showed to try and sell the game, this thing is actually closer to Red Dead Redemption 2 in its pace. But the world really is this game's greatest selling point. The amount of detail and variety of each region coupled with the draw distances and great graphics, it's just impressive. It's not as immersive as some of the
So that's the problem that it seems people are having. They're saying it's not as immersive. They're saying it's a bit shallow. But look at it. My goodness. It looks very well polished. And I guess for a game of this scope, when there's so many systems and so many things they want to do with it, sometimes it's hard to add a lot of depth to all the systems. But you know what? That's what makes a good game good. That's what gives them that separation. So let's see some more. And again, I'm waiting a few months to see what else comes of it. But I have high hopes for this game.
All-time best open world games, and you can't interact with everything, but this game's world is far more in-depth than we expected. Next at number 14, this is an obvious one, but it's Night City, and really all of Cyberpunk 2077. I think CD Projekt Red really took a big gamble making a first-person open-world RPG. You know, allowing players to get a closer look at everything tends to lead to worlds that feel less real than games that stick to third person sometimes, but they really pulled it off here. Cyberpunk's Night City is one of the grungiest, grimiest, but also most...
There's another one. I know I'm going to play this game at some point. This is already, it's especially after this last 2.0 update. It seems that they fixed all of its shortcomings on release, on the initial builds. So it's one of those, I'm going to come back to it maybe after Red Dead 2. I want to give that a play. Also, high on my list, I want to give a play for Witcher 3. But Cyberpunk, that's like a new modern classic.
Characterful cities to ever appear in the open world game genre. Like, it all starts in your rundown apartment block with its garbage filled hallways, graffiti covered walls, beat up elevators, meandering citizens. Everything feels like it kind of tells a little story. It builds something out. The city manages to be both overwhelmingly huge with these skyscrapers that blot out the sky, while also being intimately detailed at the same time. It's both ridiculous and kind of relatable. You get that this is a city. If you've ever been in a city, the feel is here. You know, not every corner of the city feels totally credible.
Yo, another big thing, maybe they'll mention it, maybe they won't. I want to take revenge for Mr. Martinez. I know you could do that. If anyone's seen that Cyberpunk anime, Road Edge Runner, I mean, very, very good. Let's see some more.
incredible. There are places that just feel like they're just dungeons for shooting bad guys, sure, but the major hubs and the interiors that you come back to multiple times are all stacked with recognizable details that just make them feel futuristic, but also neglected and beaten down. And if that ain't real, I don't know what is. This is especially true in Dogtown, though, the DLC area of the game from Phantom Liberty. It's a relatively small district that they managed to absolutely stuff with detail. This place is like Night City in miniature form, with almost like post-apocalyptic streets. They're so run down and destroyed, flanked by the richest and flashiest exclusive locations where the rich and powerful ply their influence in secret. It is peak cyberpunk stuff. The smaller surface area means they're able.
And hey, maybe something that's a little bit on the dark side. You know, there's a whole human mortality aspect of this. It'd be kind of, I think it's cool to play these games as an analysis of how close they get to real life, because cyberpunk future is coming. It's coming. In some way, shape, or form is coming. And so, you know, I do kind of like getting that glimpse into the future, I guess.
To like really go nuts with the details around here. It's not just set dressing, but like with the NPCs and the characters you meet. The world of Cyberpunk is about as lived in as a game can get. It's really the proto example of this sort of thing. And while it's not as open as something like Skyrim, you know, you can't go into literally every building, the places the game does let you go are packed with details that just really give Night City a lot of character. Next at number 13, Hogwarts Legacy. Look, whether or not you're a big Harry Potter fan.
Oh my god, it's crazy they mentioned this. I literally have this on my system. I bought the game. It's ready to go. I gotta finish my playthrough of Black Myth Wukong. I'm in chapter 5. Tune in. We're gonna finish chapter 5. We're gonna finish chapter 6. We might start New Game Plus just to kind of get a taste of it. I don't think I'll finish it. But up next is this game. Holy shit. I'm glad they mentioned it.
And you know, you got to admit that the central school, the place where you're spending a big chunk of your time in the game, it's extremely well done. Every inch of this place is packed with all these charming little details and Easter eggs that give it a lot more character than other locations in games like this. It's this huge castle structure that forces you to backtrack quite a bit through its weird winding halls, but they do a good job.
You know, the backtracking is not really an issue because it just gives you a chance to really delve deep into, you know, into your immersion of Hogwarts. Wow, this is going to be great.
Making each wing feel distinct. The school itself is also kind of like a comforting place to hang out in. There's enough little nooks and crannies and secrets to keep things interesting, but it's one of those video game locations that makes you want to kind of stop and just take it all in once in a while. Now, the rest of the game's open world isn't quite nearly as strong, but some locations do really hold up to scrutiny, like the village of Hogsmeade, which is like as vibrant and interesting to look at as Hogwarts itself. Now at number 12, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. The commitment to realism and mostly period-appropriate detail make their version of 15th century Bohemia.
Damn, what? This is awesome.
One of the most authentic open worlds we've ever seen. Many of the world's details don't just look real, they essentially are real. They apparently extensively researched and documented each location and recreated them for the game. The layouts of the roads, even many of the homes, are still standing to this day in some shape or form and are pretty much one-to-one. It's honestly kind of uncanny when you see the side-by-side pictures. The details make the world recognizable, but the behaviors of the NPCs and the way you
I have the first game. I know the second game came out and it looks way better than the first game. Wow.
interact with the world,
the combat
is what
system
makes
and the
these
muse
games
from this
feel
game,
especially lived in.
that's what
People
put it on my
react
radar.
negatively if you're dirty or stinky. The clothes you wear actually matter, and if
They put a lot of depth into it. I know that this game is one of the greats too. There's so much depth into this.
affect how people respond to you. And there's a lot of survival mechanics that need to be kept on top of things like sleeping and eating. And the game almost forces you into a specific routine that can actually make this world feel like you're inhabiting a real place. You know, you wake up, you splash yourself with some water, you grab a meal, you get dressed, maybe you head into the town. It's all minor stuff that in other games would be an annoying distraction, but here it just...
This is really for a specific audience, which is totally me. I love these open world games that kind of put you with some sense of realism in it. I know that this game does that a lot. Some people, they do it so well, it's to the detriment. Some people complain about it, actually. You know, not everything's for everyone. I think this game does really well for its audience.
Works to build a credible world that you're not just a tourist in, you're actually part of it, and that's what makes it feel really lived in. Next at number 11, for a game that's essentially a very linear action game with an open world that's mostly there just for set dressing, Mafia: The Old Country really still manages to successfully create this world that feels both recognizable but also unique. You know, the villa estate where you spend a lot of your time isn't actually all that big, but the place has personality. It's old and somewhat run down but well maintained, and you start to get to know a lot of the people milling about it. And the central town of San Celeste is especially impressive with this old world charm. The game tends to pack in unnecessary but interesting details like people carrying flags during the big race event, or the painted Roman centurion statues you can see during a festival. This may be the smallest open world in a Mafia game, I think, but it's one with the most detail and personality. It is gorgeous. It is a Godfather fan's wet dream. This game could have really been like kind of a generic Red Dead Redemption, but with Mafia guys instead. But they managed to insert a lot of authentic Sicilian cultural identity into this game, man.
I liked it. I didn't know about this game at all. It looks visually very appealing. It's very great to look at. I'm sure the storytelling is going to be very good. It seems like the game that's going to lean heavily into storytelling. Yeah, developers probably knew they can't compete with like Red Dead Redemption 2. I think so they took it a different way. They're gonna get more specific details and make it feel very authentic. Whereas Red Dead 2, as good as it is, you know, I don't know. Actually, that's the standard. I haven't played this game at all. It looks good.
And that's what makes this valley more than just set dressing for shootouts. I know that's what it is, but like, it's a place you kind of come to know and appreciate over the course of the game's story. And you're sad to see it go. And honestly, it gets a lot of points for being the first game to depict this part of the world in this time period. You just don't see any other ones like this. Next at number 10, Hell Is Us. Now, we're cheating a little bit because this one isn't really like an open world game. It's kind of split up into a bunch of small-ish open zone maps. Certain areas definitely give the impression of being open world-like, but not every...
I've seen a little bit of this game just because of the title. Cool title, but I think it's going to be shallow for my liking, especially just looking at it. I don't really judge a game too much by how it looks, though. But, you know, I don't think I'll get around to something like this.
Every zone is open. Some are pretty linear. Still, I feel wrong to talk about recent lived-in games and leave this out because it has some of the most haunting, kind of realistic, but spooky world design I've seen in a long time. Hell Is Us is a grim game that's not afraid of stark depictions of man's inhumanity to another man. Like, there are...
This shit will never end. I'll get the fuck out of here. I had no choice, man. Voss and his goons look at the magazines to see if we fired. What? Whatever you're doing in Jova, make it short. Regretful Soldier, huh? Looks pretty grim dark, but yeah, it looks good actually.
Some wild, over-the-top locations here, riddled with war crimes. Just feels like these really hellish dives into some impossible alternate reality.
Scuffed young man, I'm Victor Gaz. I left Jova to look for my mentor, Vitalis. That dude's in jail, bro. My ears are still ringing from the damn explosion. The trucks must have driven over mine or something.
But then you see like much more relatable.
Relatable? This guy's a cult priest. My life started here and it seems it will end here.
locations like the town of Jova, which has been occupied by the army in this fictional country's intentionally confusing and constantly shifting civil war. Look, there's a lot to it, from the details of the buildings, inside and out, the muddy streets, the reek of sadness everywhere. There are a lot of little details all over the place that give you an impression of who these people were, you know, their culture, who they hated, this civil war. Usually in games you get these kind of over-the-top environmental designs with hundreds of dead bodies scattered all over the place just to let us know that things are bad. But in Hell Is Us, it's little things like a crudely drawn mural or a bombed out house with a child hiding in the attic.
This is more like fantastical setting, easily, right? There was some magical blob earlier. It looks really good, but definitely not my taste. But if it is to your liking, probably on your radar, should be anyway.
Or a UN-like building that was recently evacuated suddenly. It all paints a picture of this country that's fallen into total chaos.
What? So many dogs? We will kill you? Alright, so like...
Where intentional aid organizations have been forced to flee and the chains of leadership have fallen apart, and it's really just every individual citizen out for themselves. It's a game that manages to be disturbing in a kind of less is more way, and you really get it just by looking around at these towns. The way they feel so lived in, it just tells you everything.
Okay, so there's my feeling. I feel like this game is definitely not going to be as in-depth or polished as some other games. But the developers cared a lot, maybe budget restraints or maybe time constraints, but it looks like they did a lot of storytelling with the environment. And remember, Dark Souls and the whole series came because developers cared like this. So yeah, definitely a game to support.
You need to know. It gives you all the context, and it's gorgeous. Now at number 9, Spider-Man 2. It's easy to ignore just how detailed the open world is in these games because, you know, you're spending most of your time web swinging past it, or in the case of the sequel, just straight up flying past everything. But if you take a moment to really stop and look around, there's actually a lot of personality to this world. It's not just an extremely high fidelity depiction of New York in miniature with some of the best, and by that I mean most realistic, traffic ever put into a video game. You know, it's also the little things like being...
Bro, New York traffic is something else. I tell you, New York traffic is not for the faint of heart.
Being able to help a guy go get his phone out of a grate, or an impromptu Q&A with a news crew, or all these other little oddball occurrences like being able to run the bases at this game's version of City Field. A lot of this stuff is extremely easy to miss, so it's impressive that they even bothered inserting it into this game in the first place. Little details like that stuff, or the way the random civilians try to give Spidey a high five, all that stuff just adds so much personality to the game that would otherwise be pretty lacking. You know, there's a lot more detail here than you might have noticed. And just knowing this stuff is here makes me like the game even more. Even if I'm rarely going to bother hunting any of this stuff down, it's nice that it's all there. And as a person who lives just outside the New York metro area, I do have some complaints about like how Brooklyn and Queens looks, but hey, the fact that they included it is really cool. And graphically, it is really, really impressive. It's definitely near the top of the list of like, you know, best depictions of New York in a video game.
Get off, you stupid bug!
Now at number 8, let's talk about Dragon's Dogma 2. Fast travel is severely limited. You're just forced to run around everywhere, and the map is huge, so they at least better give you something to look at, right? Well, for as many legitimate complaints there are about this game, the design of the world is excellent. It is Capcom's answer to Skyrim, with just as much, if not more, little random details that just kind of keep things interesting.
Definitely not. Let's not compare it to Skyrim. It was a competitor, but I think it's gonna be hard to compare it to a game like Skyrim.
There's a day and night cycle with NPCs that follow their own schedules.
Sure, it had some polish to it, yeah.
And just about like every house
I
in
wonder
the
who the
game's
developer
main
is. Who is the
cities
developer
can be
of
broken
this?
into. There are so many little NPC encounters that are unnecessary, but help really build up the world, like how you can get into random bar fights, or visit a brothel, or encounter quests and deal with them in numerous and not always very obvious ways.
Well met, sir.
Are you looking forward to this as much as I am?
I remember there were some crazy facts about the voice acting for Skyrim and all the quest lines and including all the DLCs. There's a lot of effort that went into voice lines that probably no one ever heard. Um, yeah, that's a cool thing to know about Skyrim. I could tell this game isn't on par just from what little I can see. I know it's decent, but
This game practically forces you to pay close attention to its world, because if you don't, then it's pretty easy to completely lose track of what the game wants you to do. For the quests especially, the
which is actually, he's presenting it as a good thing, is actually a bad thing, right? Maybe it depends on what you're looking for in your game, but technically that's a bad thing. They made it more difficult for the player to um, know what the hell they're supposed to be doing.
little details matter.
Should you need to communicate in Elvish, pray call upon me. I'll be only too glad to assist.
Other aspects of the game can be a little repetitive or tedious, but the design of the world is just filled with top-notch detail.
I think that it's because the developers had a lot of creative freedom. There's not like a realistic standard, for example, that Mafia game earlier, or like Red Dead Redemption 2. This is a lot more fantasy, and so they took a lot of creative freedom. I'm sure if they had a lot more time and a way bigger budget, we could have marked this as like one of the games we'll always be playing for decades later. But no, I think this just didn't have enough of the other things. It was definitely good. Give the developers credit. They did really good.
Next at number 7, Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon. This is another one that, look, it's not entirely open world. It doesn't have one huge map, but rather a few large maps stitched together in sequence. But every major region is huge, and in comparison to another game with a similar structure like Avowed, the world of Tainted Grail just feels a lot more credible, a lot more lived in. It's an extremely impressive achievement that a developer that's this small, with no experience making a game of this size and scope of Tainted Grail, was somehow able to make a first-person RPG that can be compared to the video game greats like Skyrim or Gothic. Each location is really dense and can be fully explored and picked apart and ransacked.
That's a good point they're making, that it really does matter with what they're starting with, how big the studio is, the experience, the funding. So, just because a game isn't necessarily on this list doesn't mean developer is necessarily bad. This is a great example of that.
Every little dungeon tells a bit of a story, every town is filled with unique landmarks and world-building details, and honestly, things you haven't seen before in a fantasy game. It's a dense one that is challenging, but that's what makes it all the more satisfying to explore, because for the most part, if you notice something, then there's probably something there, and it's more interesting and fleshed out than you expected.
Oh, he went like fast mode or something.
Now at number 6, Hollow Knight Silk Song. Look, I don't know how they were able to make a 2D Metroidvania game feel lived in, but somehow the developers, Team Cherry, they did it. What makes Silk Song unique from Hollow Knight is that you're not picking through the long abandoned bones of this ancient kingdom. Instead, you're exploring a world that only recently fell into ruin. There are far more NPCs in all corners of this world and just reacting to the catastrophe all in their own way, but even in places where there are no NPCs or that are just gauntlets of enemies, the game still manages to fill the world with all these unique little elements that make each distinct location feel like it served some kind of real purpose.
This is a great series. I'm sure that they're gonna continue it at some point. There's gonna be a third or something, a spin-off.
Each village you go through is filled
Very
with charming
fluid and
characters that
reactive.
manage to have a ton of personality despite being, you know, kind of featureless bugs. You can play music and everyone will sing. You can decorate a house and help restore a rundown settlement. It's little interactions like this that give the world of Silk Song so much more personality than its previous game, Hollow Knight, you know? Not to say that the previous game was lacking in charm, it's just that Silk Song goes way further with it. There are so many completely unnecessary little secrets and details that only exist to make the world feel more interconnected and lived in. It's an impressive achievement all around for a game that didn't need to do any of this stuff to be good, but they put in the extra effort and the final product is all the better for it. It really helps sell the magic of this game.
Wow, amazing music. I love harp.
Next at number 5, Star Wars Outlaws. Look, Ubisoft is known for creating open worlds that are less about immersing you in a real place and more about just making a playground for you to clear points of interest off a map, but once in a while, they do try to put a little more effort in. Certain Assassin's Creed games, Watch Dogs 2, and most recently, unexpectedly, Star Wars Outlaws. Look, it's a game where the core mechanics like combat or the story aren't the best, but if you are just looking for a Star Wars tourism simulation, then Outlaws does really deliver here. It makes this universe feel like an actual place, not like a glossy, shiny one, but a real, gritty, beat-up Star Wars world.
I think there's an easy 8 out of 10. Easy.
And definitely not exactly what you'd want to live in because it's filled with criminal scum and Imperial
game as a
jackboots and all
whole,
kinds
I
of
mean.
stuff, but it's fun to visit. Take any of the major city locations. They're just filled with life and detail everywhere you look. There are food stalls to get lavishly gross-looking meals at.
I could go for that. One Che Mosca, please.
If you're a Star Wars fan, honestly, it's kind of a must play. It's an 8 out of 10. It's probably one of the better games you're ever gonna get. Sound design, that's fun.
Hey, look at this. Wow.
Wow.
Smells great. Huh. Looks like it's all grown right here on Tashara.
Underground
Who doesn't like local, you know?
card
Shit.
games to play,
Local and
shady
fresh.
bars, weird vendors selling droid parts. It's just great Star Wars stuff. It's one of those games where you just kind of want to stop and stare at the world because there's always a lot going on. And while you can't actually explore everything, it's not the most interactive game, it's at least still pretty fun getting to see Mos Eisley on foot, you know? They even accurately attempted to recreate the city's layouts and the names of certain landmarks from Star Wars galaxies. And I mean, that's dedication to detail. I appreciate stuff like that.
It's about time, baby.
Get in there next.
Get that thing. My mistake.
Good boy.
Good boy. That looks really good.
Now at number 4, The Forgotten City. This is a tiny little time loop open world game that may be stretching the definition of recent, but look, it's a unique and fulfilling experience because the world is so small and very specific. The game is set in an underground Roman city, and while the story may be fantastical, the many accurate details that show how regular people lived in Rome is just cool. It's fascinating to see play out. Like, you get to see what a Roman toilet looked like, and I don't think any other game has really managed that, right? The first person perspective gives you a real close-up view of a
What? Hey, recently I saw this news that a teacher, like a high school teacher, maybe a middle school, I'm pretty sure high school, he was using Assassin's Creed as a tour. He'd give the students a tour guide of specific areas because they spent so much time and effort to recreating the town. So that's kind of a cool thing to know. They're kind of having the same deal, you know. I'm sure they spent their man hours into doing research on how Roman people are and maybe giving a more authentic feel to this game, despite it being set in a magical, fantastical setting.
world that's
cool.
very different from our own, but also not. It's a fascinating trip back to the past that I wish more games would attempt in this way. Trying to be historically accurate is always a difficult proposition for game makers. You know, it's easy to make mistakes and screw things up and piss people off, but I just appreciate the attempt, especially when it's a game made by mostly just a few people trying to do what they can.
I intend to kill every last one of you wretched degenerates, and I can think of nothing I'd enjoy more.
The many shall suffer for the sins of the one.
What the hell?
No! What have you done, you fool?
Now at number 3, The Sinking City Remastered. Look, critical response to this open world Cthulhu investigation game was kind of mixed. It's a flawed game for sure.
Fucking monkey. This guy looks like a gorilla.
You know, but one thing the developers absolutely got right is the design of the sinking city itself. The town of Oakmont, Massachusetts here recently flooded, but it's long been a site of supernatural strangeness, and you can see that everywhere, from the signage to the strange shuffling figures wandering through the town's weird dirty streets. The game has an almost Bioshock level of world building, which is far more elaborate than I ever expected going in. This is an entire alternate universe society where fishmen and cultists and half gorillas live in a single melting pot under a tense truce that could really fall apart at any moment. They crafted a real full world here, and it's far more lively and lived in than you'd expect from a developer like this. The game isn't the best, like I said. Even with the remastered version, it's pretty buggy, but it's one of the most uniquely interesting Cthulhu-themed games to come out in a
What
while.
the hell?
And while the open world can often kind of be an inconvenience that gets in the way of your investigations, it does ultimately make this town feel like a more cohesive and intriguing place to explore.
I don't know about this list. Is he really what? Number 3? Okay, at least. Got 2 more. Let's see what else we got.
Now at number 2, Fallout.
It doesn't seem like it's really filled with life or like amazing world I want to explore if I just have this old lady crying in my ear the whole time.
London. Somehow a small team of modders were able to make something in the Fallout 4 engine with the world building of Fallout New Vegas, but in a completely new, unique setting for Fallout. This is not an official product. Who knows if we'll ever get an official Fallout game that takes us out of the United States, but for a group of modders, game developers making a game in their free time here, what the team responsible for this was able to accomplish is astounding, man. This isn't just a bunch of remixed Fallout 4 assets. This thing has an entire new crew, a new roster of creatures, characters, weapons, history. This might as well be an entirely new game because it barely crosses over with the regular Fallout universe, let alone Fallout 4 stuff. Just about everything from the backstory to the factions are entirely invented just for this game. It's a crazy ambitious project and a minor miracle that it managed to come out at all, let alone be as deep and detailed as it ended up being. This has the environmental detail that is only possible when there's deep passion, enthusiasm, and time behind the project. Every location is super dense with world building. There's so much personality everywhere you look. Something this complex wouldn't even be possible with a normal game. Everywhere you look, there's some new lived in detail that makes the world feel more interconnected and real. And in a world that's intentionally absurd as Fallout's, that's especially impressive.
That's pretty cool. This is awesome. Imitation is the best form of, what do they say? That's this exactly right here. They loved Fallout so much, they made their own.
And now, last but certainly not least, down at number 1, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Every major town in Rebirth is just...
Oh, wow. That's a good number 1. That's a good number 1. Can't hate on that. I was about to say we're to number 1, and my favorite games on the list were down here. So I was about to say, I think we have a very different perspective of what makes a good open world game that truly feels alive. But yeah, this is a good number 1.
An explosion of bespoke details that are totally unnecessary but incredibly impressive. What were once one-room screens with 3 models.
This is a great remake and a good way to honor the original one.
Roaming around have become these impossibly busy fairy tale locations. NPCs are performing all their own special animations all over the place. There are full bands playing and tourists getting lost and people playing games. Every building feels unique and is filled with lived-in details that just add immersion to a world that you feel like you already know. The open world segments between these incredibly lived-in cities aren't quite as interesting, but that's what makes Rebirth like a game of contrasts. It's sometimes extremely video gamey and not particularly immersive, and then in other places, especially in...
Well, you gotta remember, this is a remake. The original was made a very long time ago. So I think you shouldn't have really mentioned that. I think it's a great game, worthy number 1. It's meant to be fun, and it also, even these kind of cutscenes and different side storylines and quests, they add a very fun element to these games. And again, this is a remake. Very good number 1 choice.
Towns and cities, they crank up the detail
Awesome
dial to
visuals.
11 with a head-spinning level of activity.
And that's what they should have done, right? Turn a 10 out of 10 game classic into an 11. Anything less would have been a dishonor.
Lush visual flourishes. Some of these locations are the most
even the water, you can see the water there. Very
remarkably photogenic places ever put in a video game. I'll stand by that. It's still kind of...
That's the word for it. This whole game is photogenic.
Unbelievable what they were able to accomplish here. Just look at anything in the Golden Saucer. It is all max effort. And you can say...
Who wouldn't want to go in there and explore that?
it's all set dressing and it's unnecessary, but it sells it. It sells the dream of what you imagined the Golden Saucer was in your head when you played original Final Fantasy VII back in the day. Just look at
Wow.
Haunted Hotel as well. Just full of
That's so good. Even the ghosts.
random jump scares for no reason other than to make this
Even the
place
ghosts
feel like
look
a
good.
true amusement park. That's the entire game, or at least the main cities and stuff. And it's Rebirth in a nutshell.
Wow.
It can be exhausting, but it is also jaw-droppingly impressive. So those are 15 lived-in open world games from the last few years that we wanted to talk about today, but there are so many other examples. So
thing
let us know in the
I wanted
comments
to
some
mention-
lived-in worlds in games that you've experienced that just are really convincing, detailed, immersive,
It's
what
a
have you.
decent
Whatever
list.
your
I was
criteria is
more
for a lived-in game
looking
world,
for a
we'd love
longer
to hear
time
your
span, I
picks because
guess.
we can talk about so many more. If you like this video, clicking the like button helps us out. We really appreciate that. And if you're new, consider subscribing, maybe hitting that notification bell because we put out videos.
I was really thinking that they were going to include some other games I had in mind, but they're talking a more recent timeline. But I'm glad that they included games that I'm about to play, Cyberpunk, and my very next game is going to be Hogwarts. I also have the original Kingdom Come. They have Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I got the first one. So, we I'm glad I watched the video, even though we might have disagreed on some of these newer titles.